I will kind of talk about three things. First of all, I have a couple of anecdotes I want to share. And after that, I want to talk a little bit about Schneider, a little bit more than my colleague Steve had to share, just to give you a backdrop of a little bit of a case study that I want to present. And then the third is kind of that case study about the implementation of ERP, or I should say ERPs, within Schneider Electric North America. So those three things. Let me start with the anecdotes. So you all heard Will Daly speak this morning quite animately with a lot of energy, and that's Will. Will and I had the opportunity of, you might say, working together in Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq and Kuwait. So we were stationed there together, deployed together. And after you saw Will's presentation and see that energy that comes out, you can know why we didn't give him a gun out there.
Not required.
Anyway, so we go back a ways. The second anecdote. There was an opportunity I had in the past to work in big data, actually data analytics, with Snap-on tools. Snap-on is a global company that makes tools, very premium tools, sells different types of tools, everything from small little widgets to gigantic wrenches that turn windmills and all sorts of things. Plus a lot of side items. There are 22 businesses within the Snap-on incorporated environment. And one of the things that drove us to, if you want to call it big data, was the fact that we had a problem. And the problem was in our little neck of the woods in Snap-on Diagnostics, which I was CIO, we had users that were what I'd call basic hands-on users, of which there were probably about 240,000 of them. They're called auto repair shops, all around the country and in Canada. And they do their business on a PC, usually in the shop, and they take their POS, or their point of sale, usually is the right pocket to the left pocket. And that's how 240,000 businesses exist. So we thought, hey, this is a great idea. Let's offer them the opportunity to save their data, because the one thing that is really abhorrent to a computing environment is an auto shop. It's just nasty. I mean, so what happens is guys would call up and say, hey, geez, I just spilled coffee on my PC and everything went blank. Can you help me get my data back? So we created a product that allowed them to push the data back to us, and here we are with this growing warehouse of now billions of records. And one day the boss, who was kind of a penny-pinching, has his first dollar ever made kind of person, said, these storage systems that you keep asking for and keep upgrading, whatever, let's get rid of this data and save ourselves some money. No more storage systems. Just get rid of the data and make more room for new data. Being a decent IT guy, I can't do that, and so it was kind of the mother of invention, in that we got to figure a way to do something with this data to help me afford my storage systems. So we went out with a EULA and created an environment where the customers allowed us to use the data stripped of the PII, and we started to collect that data, filtered it, and then realized that what we had was data that would tell us about autos and auto repairs and auto repair shops and labor costs in different parts of the country and what happens when you do this, that, and the other thing. And we created a business, a side business out of this, and we called it Auto Analytics. And actually, we eventually moved that business to Snap-on and became a business, one of the 22 businesses of Snap-on Incorporated. So it was kind of cool being a co-founder of a business like that. But that was an example of big data, kind of the problem seeking a reality and actually finding a home, and the ability to, I could really afford some storage. When I started selling my first groups or large cubes of data, and the first customer I had was Experian. And it was great in the sense that I sold to Experian specifically to AutoCheck. AutoCheck is their form of it's like a Carfax, their form of Carfax. And as the first customer, of course, we kind of pushed it and all that kind of stuff. And it was interesting because of that sale. I had a second customer, Carfax. Now, I say that only in the sense that one leads to the other. Understanding that big data, when we were talking about it, especially this morning, generates a competitive environment. And that competitive environment I saw firsthand, obviously selling to Experian, who was and is number 2 in the auto check environment. Their number 1 guy and their number 1 competitor, Carfax, absolutely had to have it. And I think you see that across the board. So if you're looking for a generation of why to do this, it's not the only reason, but it is one of the reasons, is the competitive advantage that big data has in the environment. So enough of my anecdotes and kind of get on to the second part of this, and I want to talk a little bit about Schneider Electric. So Schneider, being a very French company, by the way, you know the difference between kind of German, French, and American? French, when we're resolving a problem, they do this until they get there. Germany, on the other hand, just kind of gets there. Whether it hits the mark or not, just gets there. Americans, on the other hand, kind of, okay? So, just a little analog description of, kind of how business works. And it's been interesting since working for a French company, actually seeing this in practice. But anyway, I want to talk about the reason for Schneider. So Schneider's a relatively older company, been in business for a long, long time. We're in the business of electrical eco-energy. So we make parts, we make lots of products. Go down to Home Depot, look at Levtron, go to your house, go to the side of your house, look at the circuit breaker and see you got a little gray box, probably has a box in it that says it's got a big D in it, square D. All those are Schneider. I never heard of Schneider myself until I went to work there, or until the recruiter called me up and said, you want to come play. But I've heard of Square D, and I've heard of Levtron. I've bought so many of those things at Home Depot and Lowe's. And that's all Schneider. Big company. About, we'll go into some of the deals, but we're all over the globe, and that's kind of cool. One of the things that Schneider has focused on as it shifted its perceptions of being, let's say, not only a manufacturer, but a provider of energy solutions, is in its global supply, its ability to supply things. It isn't just become products. The supply isn't just a product or a mechanistic base. It's about information, and it's about process. So selling process, selling information is an important part of it. Now, we talked about a little bit this morning about what data is and how we should plan our data. And that's good, but it comes with a warning. If you're planning your data, you're assuming that you already have some of the answer. There's nothing worse than coming to an answer without really researching the problem. So, to cut it short, bottom line is don't necessarily plan all of your data. Allow your data to tell you things you don't know. Be open to the fact that data, especially when you're talking about supercomputing data, big data, has a lot to teach you, has a lot to tell you that you don't know. And you have to be open to it. And that's hard for companies to exist. If you go into a CEO's office and say, I'm looking for this funding, do this, so that I can find out something I don't know. But what is it that you don't know? I don't know. Well, how do we know we need to know it? I don't know that either. But I'll know when I know that I don't need to know what it is, or I'll know what I needed to know at the time that I know it. Just seeing how many eyes glaze over it. So, anyway.
How many CEOs buy that?
Well, right now I've got a perfect track record, 0. So, anyway, lines of business at Schneider are many. And again, this is kind of part of the French connection. We separate our business into various areas: partners, energy business, industry, IT business, solar. So we have various forms of business, and to each of those businesses, we generate systems and we generate a, you might say, a focused supply chain. We cover very different demands. In other words, the demands kind of define where those businesses kind of operate. And here are some of them: economic, the government, obviously, industrialization, high residential and urbanization areas, and of course, beautiful digitization. And, oh, by the way, if you're worried about some of the spelling here, it's French, okay? So I'm using a French dictionary here, so you'll see some interesting things, French translated to English. And one of the focuses that Schneider is looking at, and I think it's relatively good, especially for a global company to look at, is the global operational problems that exist today. And so we're worried about the planet, and we're worried about those things that are hurting the planet and those things that could help the planet. And obviously, as any business would concern itself with, is how can we then leverage those concerns and problems for both a business that leaves behind it a very, very strong wake that is positive to the planet rather than negative. And so we know that the approach, both in terms of the ability to produce and the ability to consume, are both going at kind of negative rates. And we have to find a way to kind of equalize and stabilize that. And so we believe that both our conservation efforts, as well as a active and aggressive securing energy plan, is probably the best go-forward strategy in the marketplace. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because it sounds somewhat philosophical, obviously, from a business standpoint, because it drives the backdrop of what we do in terms of our systems. And in a way, it is a value creation or a value statement for us to test our resolve as we get down to the actual tactical efforts we do in producing our products and our services. So, basically, this is kind of an open statement: is as a global specialist in energy process as well as in energy management, we try to make energy efficiency a reality that makes sense for a business. And that's kind of our aim. So with that in mind, we take a look at some of the devices that we then look in terms of products and product areas, and here are some of them, and believe these are responsible products, responsible directions in which we direct our company. And when you think about it, where the rubber hits the road, the reality of how you apply that is in terms, at least in North America, we have a change that has to occur in 208 sites within Canada, United States, Mexico, and Central America. And that's a lot of sites. And the change is important. Now, how many of you, in terms of maybe your IT work and ERP systems or whatever, faced a plant manager or a director of something within plant operations or whatever, and heard them say as a part of their requirements, you need to make it look like what my guys are doing now. I'm going to spend millions of dollars and I'm going to make it look like the manual process you're doing today. Yes. Really? I mean, you think the company's going to spend that amount of money and invest that amount of time and make that so that it can look exactly like what your guys do with their fingers and, process through the line and that kind of thing? And the answer almost always is, yeah, why wouldn't you? And that's a tough one, because it really points to the fact that organizational change isn't just about changing our products. It isn't just about changing our philosophy, but it's changing the way the global supply chain works in an effort that transits the A and the B and the C, the serialization of our current manufacturing environment, and creates actually a new environment where 1 and 1 equals 3. It has to, or else the investment that's made is of no value. So really what it comes down to is global supply chain is the ability to actually deliver on the promise of being able to add 1 and 1 and come up with 3. And that's a high delivery expectation for automation. It's a high delivery expectation for any software product. It's a high delivery expectation for any process. just for kicks and just for some stats, this is a picture of one of our headquarters place in Rue Malmaison in Paris. It gives you an idea of what Schneider is. It's a 54 billion euro company. 45% of its revenue is in new economies, in new parts of the world. We have 230,000 employees in over 100 countries, and we dedicate ourselves to R&D in all sectors across all the product areas and all the different business areas of anywhere between 4 and 7%. We keep that, pretty religiously. So it's a good footprint, and it's a good way to look at how we proceed through our various funding for automation and our various funding for our products and funding for our processes in the eco world. So now I want to specifically get to the third part, which is to talk about what we're doing in global supply chain, specifically with transitionings of our global ERP. Now, when I talk about ERP, I'm talking about in the most generic sense. So it's going to include all sorts of things: CRM, different types of FICO, different types of reporting, MRP, all those fun acronyms that many of you have come to know and love. But basically, we'll just talk in generic terms in terms of ERP systems. What we use today is a templated version of SAP. So we use an ECC6 base, and we've taken that base and we've molded it to a corporate shell. And we use that corporate shell to employ that ERP system across the board in every country, in every site, sales office, working office, and manufacturing plant throughout the world. And we call that bridge. And in North America, we have this bridge transformation where we're transforming many of the locations to this bridge base. Now it's great because it, in a sense, unifies the ERP to a certain extent. However, there's some other things that kind of cause some problems associated with that. We'll talk about in a minute. But what it does is it unifies to a certain extent the global supply chain. Obviously gives us an opportunity not only to centralize our support, but also to keep track of and centralize our data. And this generates a significant amount of data. What you see here in this particular chart is a series of projects. They're really programs. We kind of, because we're big, everything kind of gets squished down in terms of explanation. But one program, for instance, pick one. It says USP7, product manufacturing. That represents 18 different projects in North America. So that in itself is a program, so for what it's worth. And that particular program, for instance, focuses on what we call MTO or CTO. Many of you know that as made to order or configure to order, which unfortunately does not explain the intuitive nature of that piece of manufacturing. Configure to order means it's a cookie cutter. Okay? Made to order means that you're ordering it from a catalog, which is another form of cookie cutter. So it's not customized, even though that's what it sounds like. It is just simple MTO, CTO. So if you've been in manufacturing, you already know this, but if you haven't, it's one of the peculiarities of the naming convention. And then we have what we call USP4, which is ETO, or engineer to order. And this is a little bit fun because engineer to order for an electric company making low voltage, medium voltage, and high voltage equipment, along with processes and services to go along with that, is fairly robust. It's a challenge, in other words. So if you're a hospital and you're going to build something from the ground up, you're going to have energy systems and electrical systems and all those kinds of things. You're going to come in and you're going to tell us what you want. I mean, we've got lots of stuff to check off and all that kind of stuff, but in the end, it's usually a customized effort. That's an ETO type of deal. Versus if you want to go to Home Depot and buy a receptacle for your house and it happens to be either white, beige, or brown, then we punch those out in the millions every day, and you'll just go buy it and enough said. So the difference between what we do in terms of made to order versus engineer to order.
Quick question.
Sure.
I don't think we've been interrupting for questions, Just to
What a shame.
Just to clarify. So on your initiatives and their supporting programs and those programs supporting projects, so you've got a bit of a visualization here. How is that built? How are you sort of visualizing or dashboarding that sort of big management challenge? Because we're facing that
Sure.
at our place right now, so I was just curious.
Well, I probably don't have to tell you, I mean, segmentation or in pieces is, you can only do that. Eating the elephant in one big bite isn't going to work.
Right.
And there's a natural segmentation, so this doesn't reflect the natural part. The natural part is the North America versus EMEA versus Asia Pacific versus IMSA, South America, Africa. So we're divided into 5 regions. So each of the regions, in other words, I have 4 counterparts that control business systems for that region. And we all use a templated version of our bridge environment. We all use a consistent data center, but it's kind of our regional stuff in that data center. We use a combined network. So some of that has its global aspects to it for which we participate in. Then comes the localization. That's where this comes in. So when you look at our plants in the United States, much different than plants in Europe. And in fact, the plants in Europe look much different than the plants in France. Why? Oh, vive le différence. I mean, it's just the way it is. And you go to Asia Pacific, a whole different deal. And so what's happened is the company surrounded itself by taking a look at the reality of manufacturing in the global picture and said, we're going to have to allow the global picture to tell us where the lines are, where the boundaries are. So they did. And then when they did that, the aspect of using the global template, the bridge product, had 2 aspects to it. It had the global service piece to it that everybody has. Then there's a localization capability. Why? Well, for various reasons. Plant managers are like little gods. They just are. And they say, look, this is the way we do this. We need to do it. And therein lies the balance between, hey, this is what my guys did with their fingers, automate it. Just make it look like it was their fingers doing it. No. And then you challenge that. And that localization effort takes place inside the region. Global guys never see it. And so what the design was is elevate something to the level of the global aspects that can be controlled, and then localize your local control, if you will, negotiating the capabilities and still making it a part of a bigger whole.
So you have some metrics that are common globally,
Yep.
and then some that are just local.
Yeah, and in fact, when you do the local piece, you actually build those metrics to go along with it. And you have some templates, you have some things to go with, but then, part of that is listening to, your plant manager and to the data itself to tell you what it should be. So that's how we've kind of achieved that. Does it work really well? I can say it works. Does it work really well? Well, that's why I guess they have people like me, is you go in and, you help grease the skids, you help troubleshoot, you help, step on hands and feet every once in a while. It takes some, getting used to. But in the end, we've been fairly successful at getting this to work well. And the systems that we're replacing, in some cases there are no systems. In other cases there are systems that are, I think the youngest system is 18 years old, the oldest one is 26. So I'm pulling out, Commodore 64 stuff. It's kind of interesting.
A lot of green screen pick-based stuff.
Yes, pick basic, quote to cache, Sybase, Power Builder. I got a first version of Sybase operating right now, running a manufacturing plant. Okay. No. So it's kind of neat, living in an environment with a museum in vitro. But that's part of the challenge. That's part of the fun.
Keeps you open-minded about that.
And also keeps you up at night. And so I've used the term bridge. Bridge, as I said, is that we lay on that. And then underneath bridge, we localize it. So it gives us the negotiative power to work at the plant level while at the same time establishing the enterprise. So then there's an important point, not one I'm particularly proud of, but one that's still one of the powerful elements in the Schneider environment, and that is we federate our ERP systems. Schneider buys 20 companies a year. That's kind of been constant for the last 13 years. We bought anywhere from 13 to 24 companies, average 20 companies a year. And so implementing those companies, integrating those companies has been a bit difficult. Again, French procedure, and it's not often very efficient. So what's interesting is we've ended up with 12 major ERP systems throughout the entire enterprise. And I'm only dealing with one of them, and in a sense, it's about 34% of the over global federation of ERPs, but nevertheless, 12 ERP systems? This isn't good, this isn't right, it just happens to be the case. We're going to do better, hopefully, but once again, we have that challenge. I knew I'd get my corkscrew in really well in this talk, so. Okay. So this is a typical bridge transformation timeline. And because we have very little time here, I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of what's happened over the last couple of years and what will be happening here in the next couple of years. Interesting enough, I've only been with Schneider 1 year. 1 year, 2 weeks, 2 days, 6 hours, 40 minutes. But who's counting? And for 6 years that the program has been in place, we made 0 implementations. Oof. There was a lot of circling the wagons. There was a lot of planning. There was a lot of preparation. So I have to give credence to that because it is a fairly large program. But, you know, many of us have had the opportunity of putting in ERP systems or CRM systems or MTS systems or ILS systems. And, you know, you start as a project and you move forward and you finish it and go on to the next thing. This was a little bit of this going on. Well, we were able to get that a little off the car, kick some things off the sidewalk, and so in the last 6 months, we've made 5 implementations. We have 2 in process right now, and by the first quarter of 2015, we'll have 10 implementations completed. And so that's pretty much, you know, on schedule if you want to look at that. That's the way it should be. But we're kind of 6 years too late. I mean, 6 years in the making. Jeez, it's kind of crazy. But I think we're on a good track now. We have, as a result of that, also kind of meted out what causes that, what causes some of this stuff. And I think it's something everyone here has experienced. When you sit down for requirements, one of the first guarantees of any requirements base is what? Big C, change. Change probably generates a significant amount of branching. And in software development, we all kind of know what branching is. And that branching does take time, and it eats up the field. And it's really tough when you look at program management and trying to keep the change while at the same time, remember that balance between the template version and the localization. It's the localization that builds the change. And so a lot of our challenges is how do you get the organization to kind of follow the template while at the same time giving it what it needs locally, while at the same time trying to maintain somewhat of an enterprise level, while at the same time being able to organizationally change and shift the way we do things that happen to be part of our primary business. It's a balancing act. And it all really kind of comes down to the guy that's on the 3rd shift, you know, working, and his index finger. Because this is the decision maker. When he pushes the button, or doesn't, because he doesn't know how, because the system's confusing to him, or he wasn't a part of the decision to do it now this way instead of that way, that decision point gets real important. And we found that to be critical in the aspects of change and the aspects of actually getting things done. Okay, just a real quick piece of eye candy. This is what it looks like, or it looked like, a year ago. Now, if you see any green, green means an updated system. Any other color, it's in the trash. That's what our environment looked like in North America. After we complete our deployment, this is what it will look like. Now, also to speak to what we talked about this morning in terms of data, one of the key factors in any data concern in an enterprise, especially when you're looking at, if you're looking at big data or supercomputing data, is source. Where does it come from? How is it generated? Because what we're doing in global supply chain isn't just putting a system in. We are building a source Really, we're building a series of sources. These are those sources. This is where the data comes from. And this is where we have to know where to pick, because you can have the best Hadoop environment in the world, get the wrong source, and you got an empty drum. Cement mixer with water in it. Not going to do any good. So you got to know the source, and these are our sources. Also, without governance, without some framework of putting it together and knowing what your skill sets are and applying those skill sets, you're kind of trying to fly without wings. And in this case, this is just a model of our particular program governance and the setup for it. Not hierarchical at all. It's matrix. This is a matrix environment. In fact, I report to 4 people. I have 4 bosses, who's the CIO. And it's a little strange, but it's also very French. And I won't say it's better than more hierarchical environments. It's different, but it is part of the lay of the land. And it's interesting because in a matrix environment, you're even more challenged to leverage your resources. And that's a key element in being able to work your programs. Now, one of the things that was important, and this is the kick off the sidewalk aspect to what we had to do about a year ago to get things moving, is we realized there were a few things in this circling the wagons that we had to address. And they were things to do, and I've got them outlined here. And basically, you got to have a strategic review. We had gone without a strategic review for over 6 years, and it was time to get not only the top down to reconfirm their dedication, but we had to inform and repower the bottom up. And boy, it was obvious that the two weren't even meeting in the middle. We also had to refrain from a scorched earth policy, and what I mean by that is that, it's typical. I'm going to invest now $200 million in this ERP system. Great. Of course, we're going to take the legacy system and turn it off while you're doing it. You can't. And in fact, you're going to do something that's even going to make them have, worse constipation, and that is you're going to want to fund the legacy environment. You want to do what? That's throwing money away. No, we're operating business. You have to keep things going. There is a rate of change. There's a rate of enhancement and maintenance, as all of operational people know. And so you still have to maintain and enhance. Now, you do it maybe to a reduced extent, but celebrate that to the management, and that's sometimes a tough call, but very, very important. You cannot have a scorched earth policy with regards to your legacy environment. At the same time, you can't kiss and run either. You can't say, oh yeah, we're going to put this in, but I'm going to keep my legacy over here, nice and tight and secure and whatever. Got to let go of those too. So there's that balancing act. We have to consider the front office and the back office as different, but integrated. And this is really tough because in many legacy systems, the front office and the back office really were just the office. They did both. We faced that, and we faced that with 200 plants, and it was tough. And so now we have to look at being able to do that. And this is where the federation piece comes in with regards to ERP. Because you got a back office that's going to really be your residential anchor. It's going to be your data. But your front office, for certain pieces of the business, like I said, there's 7 different profiles of the business, energy and industry and IT and all those. They're going to look for different faces. And you have to be open to that. Oh, it's got to be this, and it can only be this, and this is the only front end. I don't know about you guys. Have you seen a front end from SAP? It's a wonderful green screen experience. Not particularly the one I'd want to use or have my 12-year-old daughter use. I don't have a 12-year-old daughter, but that's okay. It's just not something that I'd share with my people coming up. So you have to look at these as 2 different things. Also, understand that momentum is not progress. It just isn't. You can be doing things, okay? But that doesn't mean you're progressing. It just means you're doing things. You actually have to have metrics to know whether or not you are going from point A to point B and that 1 and 1 is equaling 3. Or else you're just running in place. Your strategic plan has got to be a resource plan. Because if you're not looking at that, then your strategy's flawed. And there's a lot to say about that, but I think in any really kind of short consideration